Black Power, Black Beauty, Black by popular demand. This is Black's History Month, a 28-day celebration of Black exploitation films. First up for this year's Black History Month is The Watermelon Man. Wow, you could just name movies anything back then, huh? It's the story of a racist white man who mysteriously wakes up one morning transformed into a black man. This movie is important to the blaxploitation movie history more for the man who directed it than the movie itself. I mean, the movie is good, excellent actually, but it's directed by Melvin Van Peebles, who went on to direct Sweetback's Baadasssss song right after this. As the story goes, Columbia Pictures wanted to make riskier films with more controversial themes, but they didn't want to have these films tied to a white director, so they hired a black director instead, and if the film flopped, they could just blame it on the black director. Naturally, in steps Melvin, who had his own ideas about how the movie should be presented, which of course clashed with the vision of screenwriter Herman Rocher. Herman wanted to make a movie that was more of a satire on white liberals, whereas Melvin wanted more themes of black power. When you watch the movie, it appears like they came away with a happy medium, and to be honest, it seems like more of Herman's ideas got used more than Melvin's, but we'll get there. The Watermelon Man is the story of Jeff Gerber, a white as hell name if I've ever heard one, who's an insurance salesman that lives a somewhat idealistic lifestyle with a nice house and a nice neighborhood, 2 kids and a wife. The only thing that's missing is the dog. At least that's the way he sees it. In reality, although he does have a nice life, most people who deal with him on a daily basis absolutely hate his guts because he's a straight up asshole and obnoxious for no reason at all, and racist in an annoying way. Like, yeah, racism sucks and all, but I'd personally rather deal with the racist who outright hates me and doesn't talk to me at all, other than the one who makes slick racist jokes like he's actually my friend.
Any rioting in the neighborhood last night? I don't see any broken windows. What's the matter? This place ain't good enough to loot? In the good old days, back in the old South, you'd have to drive from back here. Get it? Back of the bus?
Even some of the white people that Jeff deals with on a daily basis can't stand his ass. And it feels like his wife only really tolerates him because she loves him. If you haven't noticed by now, Jeff looks a little weird for a white man, doesn't he? That's because he's played by severely underrated black actor Godfrey Cambridge in Whiteface, who I've talked about multiple times in Black History Months. Now I know these days that Whiteface gets a lot more backlash than it did in the past, but considering originally the studio wanted a white man to play the role and then switched to blackface, I think they made the right decision for the success of the film. I just think it works better with a black man pretending to be a white guy than the other way around, especially with how well Cambridge plays it. See, because when Jeff turns into a black man, technically, he's still a white man with black skin. Nothing else changes. His mannerisms, his voice, his personality all remains the same, which means Cambridge had to play a convincing white man the entire movie. And he nails it in my opinion. It's a lot harder than it sounds, even for an actor. I love the over-the-top goofiness in the beginning because he's just so full of himself. He gets away with stuff that only a white man ever could. He races a bus on foot halfway to work, casually assaults his co-workers, and gets away with underperforming at his job. Although the makeup can sometimes take you out of it, especially when he's standing next to actual white people, Cambridge brings you right back into it with his constant energy. This doesn't change once he becomes black either. It's hilarious watching Jeff go through all the stages of grief, and I mean he goes through all 5. First denying the truth by blaming it on a tanning light that he uses every morning, because of course, that would change your hair and your nose also. Then anger when he starts lashing out at his wife, who only wants to help and who surprisingly doesn't immediately leave at first sight of him. Then bargaining, depression, and eventually acceptance. Speaking of acceptance, I found it touching that his kids don't actually treat him any differently. It's almost like they can't even tell he's black, you know, because kids don't see color and everything. It's interactions like that which elevates this movie in the second half, because it's educational about race relations in a way that doesn't make the white audience feel uncomfortable, but also in a way that makes black people go, yep, I can relate to that. It is a comedy after all, so they couldn't make it that heavy. Like when Jeff tries to race the bus like he normally does, but this time as a black man. All he's doing is running, but the people lose their shit. The cops even get involved. And the reasoning for all this is, well, he's a black man who's running. He had to have stolen something. Be on the lookout for short appearances by Duerville Martin and also Melvin Van Peebles himself. In short, The Watermelon Man is great, and I'm glad Van Peebles got to tell the story the way he wanted to for the most part. I like how every interaction that we see in the first half has an opposite effect in the second half. Not all of them necessarily bad. And even though everybody knows it's Gerber, it's interesting that he's still treated differently just based off something as simple as his skin color, even though he's the same exact person, racism and all. There's tons of commentary to take away from this movie. Van Peebles said that the studio and the screenwriter originally wanted the movie to have a "it was all a dream" type ending, which he didn't agree with, and neither do I. So he convinced them to let him film 2 endings, but conveniently forgot to film the ending that they wanted, and waited till it was too late to inform them. Classic. And thank him for that, because if they gave old Jeff Gerber an out, he'd never learn nothing. It was that type of interference that prompted Melvin Van Peebles to turn down a 3-movie contract with Columbia and strike out on his own. And the rest is history. The Watermelon Man. Yes, it's as racist as it sounds, but don't let that deter you.